Disclaimer. Per the Copyright Act of 1976, Sections 106 and 107 to be precise, copyrighted content can be used under fair use. Because this show is overall educational, all of what I am doing is protected under fair use. Any copyright claims submitted by companies, third parties, or otherwise are consequently false and could be grounds for perjury. Thank you, and have a nice day. Space. An endless expanse of stars, galaxies, and other cosmic remnants. In the most unlikely corner of the Milky Way lies our solar system, caught in a seemingly perpetual cosmic dance. The planets, almost intuitively, orbit around our closest star in the universe, the Sun. Among the lifeless planets, except for possibly the tyrannical alien race that lives on Mars, is a pale blue dot which supports all kinds of life. This pale blue dot, the carrier of all known life in the universe, is our Earth. Today on the Logo Corner, we will be talking about our Earth. I mean, it's not going to be like this massive Disney nature documentary, but we are going to mention the Earth somewhat. Just watch the damn episode. Hello and welcome to the Logo Corner, where companies can copyright a sunset if they feel ambitious enough. Today we're going to discuss another movie company which also maintained a sterling reputation, mainly due to the genius of Steven Spielberg, moderately successful theme parks in Orlando and Hollywood, Jim Carrey, see also The Grinch, Bruce Almighty, and Liar Liar, and of course box office records. Furious 7 and Jurassic World, anyone? This logo, however, goes above and beyond. We're going to go really high in the sky for this one. So high that reading Rainbow will be blushing. Forget about the high elevation of the Paramountain and the rest of the ground you are currently standing on, because I'm escorting you into one of NASA's spaceships that I received on loan. Don't ask me why, just accept. In any event, time for liftoff to get an exclusive view of our next major studio logo. Yes, the entire Earth, oceans, continents, and all, are the prime subjects of a film company that dared to include all of the Earth in its logo. I'm surprised they didn't copyright the damn planet yet. Universal Pictures, Inc.
2, 1, booster ignition, and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery, returning to the space station, paving the way for future missions beyond.
The Discovery roll program. Houston now controlling the flight.
Universal Pictures, Inc. is considered the third oldest motion picture company in the world, after the French film studios Gaumont and Pathé, and the Danish film company Nordisk. But you already knew that if you have seen the Paramount Pictures episode. Hint hint, watch watch. At any rate, I did not explain this in full, so I will explain it in this episode since all of you have received context throughout the previous 4 episodes. Universal Pictures is considered one of the big 6 major film studios. That is, it's a film studio that A, is both a production and distribution company, B, makes a crap ton of films within a single year, and C, garners significant box office revenue. As of 2015, Universal is considered a top-tier film company, sharing this honor with Warner Brothers, Paramount Pictures, and 20th Century Fox, which we already covered, and Columbia Pictures and Walt Disney Pictures, which will be covered in future episodes. The Big 6 evolved from the studios that flourished during the golden age of Hollywood. These studios, however, only gained momentum after they broke free from the tight stranglehold of one Thomas Edison and his associated company, namely the Motion Pictures Patents Company. This company was colloquially known as the Trust. This will be expounded upon once we shift our focus to Universal, but essentially because Edison patented almost everything related to movie cameras and filming, he wished to consolidate all distributors into one trust where the company would make bank on fees related to the use of said cameras and tools needed to actually make the movies in question. Since, again, Edison was a patent monger. How dare he invent a zillion things? Because this glorified monopoly had unrestrained control of so many aspects of production and distribution to the point where they would hire thugs to disrupt productions that the Trust did not allow to happen, independent filmmakers decided to revolt. They did this by moving to the West Coast, where the weather was fine and the distance expansive, meaning that the Trust would have more difficulty exerting their seemingly infinite influence over these independent entities. Of course, one of the companies that decided to go westward was Universal. Several other studios followed suit. After several years of litigation, the trust was dissolved as it violated the Sherman Antitrust Act. The company officially died in 1918, merely a decade after it was originally founded in 1908. After the demise of the trust, the Hollywood studios began emerging, and slowly but surely became eminent film companies that defined the Hollywood movie landscape for many decades. During the Golden Age, 8 film studios were considered major film companies. The 8 consisted of the Big Five, which were the familiar faces of MGM, Paramount, 20th Century Fox, and Warner Brothers, and a new film company to the story, RKO Pictures. The remaining majors of the 8 were referred to as the Little Majors, or Mini Majors. Our soon-to-be-familiar pal Universal was part of the Little Three, alongside Columbia and United Artists. They were considered smaller as they owned fewer theater chains and, in the case of United Artists, acted more so as a distributor than a producer of films. Later on, when the Supreme Court again intervened to dissolve monopolies, this time it forced major film studios to divest themselves of the theater chains they owned so as not to get an unfair leg up on other competing film companies, massive changes began occurring within the Big Five and Little Three. For one thing, one of the Big Five, RKO Pictures, collapsed as a result of mismanagement by 1959. By the 1960s, it was corporate takeover heaven, and Universal, like other film companies we discussed prior, seemed to participate in a revolving carousel of parent companies. This will be discussed later, of course. By the 1970s, MGM experienced a massive decline, as discussed already, due to their studio downsizing and producing less films a year. By the 1980s, MGM joined forces with United Artists to become, well, MGM UA. By that point, they lost their major film status and became a mini-major film studio. It has remained so to the present day. Around the same time, Disney, having already demonstrated their dominance in the box office and in the movie industry in general, managed to officially become one of the majors. In addition, 2 new companies, Orion and TriStar, were formed in the mid-1980s and were immediately considered mini-majors after some time. As we approach the 1990s, we see the immediate decline of Orion and TriStar as their power as mini-majors fizzled out for various reasons, mostly due to bankruptcy. Film studios were again bought, sold, and acquired. 20th Century Fox was obtained by Rupert Murdoch and his monopolistic company News Corp in the late 1980s. Columbia was sold to Japanese electronics company Sony in 1989. Warner Brothers merged with Time around the same snicker time, and Universal was part of the many wild exchanges that were transpiring. Again, we will touch upon that later in the video. At this point, the familiar Big Six appeared out of the corporate confusion and trade-offs. In the 2000s, the only company that actually was acquired multiple times by different corporations was, you guessed it, Universal. Beyond that, the Big Six remained the same, with some slight changes in the ranks of the mini-majors. There you have it. Hopefully this protracted discussion of the Big Six did not deter you from watching this episode any further. But I figured why not have some context when discussing major motion picture studios. There has to be a reason why I am discussing them in the first place, right? Enough housekeeping for today. Let us finally discuss the history of Universal before all of you fall asleep. Universal Pictures was officially founded in 1912, the same year as Paramount Pictures. Universal was founded by, and I'm not kidding, this is going to be long, Carl Laemmle, Mark Dittenfest, Charles O. Bauman, Adam Kessel, Pat Powers, William Swanson, David Horsley, Robert H. Cochrane, and Jules Rouletor. Phew! All of these people were film producers and film studio executives that left indelible marks on Hollywood and the motion picture industry. However, the most important founder of the bunch was German film pioneer Carl Laemmle. Carl Laemmle, ostensibly enough, was originally born in Germany, but emigrated to the US in 1884. Originally, Laemmle worked as a bookkeeper, but like most enterprising businessmen, he realized he could conquer the untapped market of Nickelodeons. No, not that Nickelodeon. Thank you. He realized he could conquer the untapped market of these little movie theaters, mainly because they were the first movie theaters in the United States. Certainly that drips with loads of opportunity. Now recall from before that I mentioned Thomas Edison and his ravenous desire to profit from all of his patents. Bear in mind, he was a genius in his own right, but every hero has a tragic flaw. In Edison's case, he was a cutthroat and borderline megalomaniacal businessman. Edison's multitude of patents included the patents for movie cameras, parts inside the movie cameras, phonographs to record audio, and so on and so forth. Of course, the trust was established for the purpose of collecting fees for usage of Edison's equipment that he patented. However, independent filmmakers and producers like Laemmle were fed up constantly paying Edison for, well, pretty much everything. Therefore, Laemmle, being the keen entrepreneur that he was, formed one of his first companies, aptly named the Independent Moving Pictures Company in 1909. Cochrane, who knew Laemmle prior, joined Laemmle in his efforts to break convention. Laemmle and his company were responsible for not only creating some of the earliest films in the American motion picture industry, but also inventing the screen credit, as Edison and the Trust refused to do so with their movie productions. From there, the first movie stars sprung out of the movies. These stars included big-name actors and actresses like King Baggett and Florence Lawrence, aka the Biograph Girl. Laemmle, the self-proclaimed pirate and rebel against the Trust, spearheaded the formation of other independent companies that also wanted to bring down the Edison regime. Then, the Independent Moving Pictures Company transplanted themselves alongside other companies from the familiar grounds of Fort Lee, New Jersey, the place where all early Hollywood movies were created, to Hollywood, California. This made matters more difficult for the Trust as, again, they would be more unable to impose their strict regulations to the independents on the other side of the country. In 1910, Laemmle incorporated all the independent companies that revolted against the Trust into what was known by the wordy name of the Motion Picture Distributing and Sales Company. The Trust, in response to this incorporation, issued an injunction against Laemmle for the use of a camera without crediting Edison. Fortunately for the company and Laemmle, the Trust lost the case. The new company would only last for 2 years, as infighting within the company broke out and caused the immediate dissolution of the company. Laemmle decided to reincorporate in the wake of such troubles. As a result, Laemmle and the scores of founders I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, each of them being the owners of their own independent studios, formed what was then known as the Universal Film Manufacturing Company. This occurred around 1912. Meanwhile, the Trust was facing more problems. By 1914, the company lost its European market due to the chaos created by World War I. In the subsequent year, 1915, the Supreme Court admonished the company, claiming its protection of its patents to be an abuse of their power and a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act, as I mentioned before. Again, the company dissolved in 1918. 1915 was also the year Carl Laemmle opened Universal City Studios, which is now known today as Universal Studios Hollywood. It immediately became the largest Hollywood studio for close to a decade. Laemmle also opened the studio to tourists, giving Universal a commercial appeal. Another interesting side note was Universal's cartoon division, which I also believe should be a separate video since it has a fascinating history. Universal owned the rights to a certain Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, which was created by, wait for it, none other than animation pioneer Walt Disney and partner in crime of iWorks. Because Disney refused to accept lower payment for producing Oswald, Disney decided to create one of the most beloved cartoon characters in the world, Mickey Mouse. Disney then founded the Walt Disney Company, and the rest is history, and will also be reserved for a separate video. Ironically enough, Universal was relegated to being insignificant in the animation industry, and the person behind Disney's rebellion against Universal, Charles Mintz, was disowned by Universal. Now it is finally time to talk about the part of Universal that everyone is waiting for, the logo of Universal. Here we go into our first variant for the company. 2 years after the official incorporation of Universal, the first logo for the company was devised. However, the first logo does not even look like the familiar Earth. Instead, it looks more like a white button surrounded by what appears to be a set of Saturn's rings. How strange that Saturn has become a major player in the story of Universal when it's supposed to be all about the Earth. It reminds me of the freaky Interglobal home video logo, except without the gross special effects and unsettling synthesizer music. Brrr. Anyways, the first logo is rather complicated, with the words Universal and Films on the top and bottom portions of the white circle respectively. Contained in the rings around the circle are the words The Transatlantic Film Company Limited. This company was, at the time, Universal's British distributor. However, in future variants this byline disappears. The associated music for the variant was usually the movie's opening or closing music, as Universal did not have an official jingle or score yet. Here is an example of this strange Saturn-esque logo. A rather interesting beginning for Universal's logo history, but this rare variant was then replaced by another rare variant in 1919. Here is our next variant, and certainly the most elusive one of the bunch. In this rather rudimentary variant, we see a globe that has the words Universal Films on the front. Behind the globe is a checkered background with varying shades of gray. The word Universal is located on the top portion of the logo, and the font of Universal reminds me of the font used by our currency for some weird reason. Underneath the globe, the words Film Manufacturing Company exist in an arc which is concave down, if you know your calculus. The words Pacific Coast Studios proudly asserts that Universal is a West Coast company, and don't you forget it. And just underneath those words is the location of Universal Films, in Universal City, California. Unfortunately, because of the rarity of the logo, I could only find a still image of it. TCM apparently shows films with this version of the Universal logo, so if any of my faithful viewers can dig up this variant, since Lord knows I tend to miss these sort of things, please feel free to let me know. For now, I will only show a picture of the logo. Totally not boring, am I right? Certainly helps that there's no music to accompany this logo since, again, it's a freaking still image. Darn you, Universal, and your trashing of silent films! Curse you and your history! Enough of my bellowing. Before we delve into other variants, I want to show a rather interesting variant of the Universal logo that, well, looks like a completely different logo than the one we are attempting to discuss. Don't worry, it's still related to Universal, just that the aesthetic choices are rather fascinating to say the least. I suppose if you're a big-name Hollywood mogul, you would have this insuperable desire to plaster your face on the things you owned. Carl Laemmle certainly believed that his face represented quality, so in an act of authentic modesty, another rare variant of the Universal logo was created to remind the viewers that yes, Carl Laemmle is responsible for your impending entertainment. The variant also includes a globe, although it may not be immediately apparent considering the continents are obscured from view. The centerpiece of the logo, obviously, is Carl Laemmle's portrait superimposed on the globe. Underneath the globe are the words Carl Laemmle Presents, in a cursive font excluding the word Presents. The globe also appears to be spinning as the logo presents itself. The entire logo is placed in front of a rather grimy background with nondescript areas of gray and light gray. The music that accompanies this logo is ominous, to say the least. It's almost as if Carl Laemmle is glaring towards the audience from beyond the grave to remind everyone that his spirit will haunt your nightmares. Or maybe that's where Robert Colbert got the ideas to score Dark Shadows. It's funny, I made a big deal about the Earth prior, and we are already in the third variant with either zero or indirect signs that there is an Earth in the Universal logo. Fear not, we are finally going to see our amazing planet in our next variant. Or rather, a somewhat shoddy version of it. This variant represents a lot of firsts for the evolution of the Universal logo. For one thing, we are greeted with the first version of the Earth, albeit a strange model of the Earth that appears to have been slapped together at the last minute. We are also introduced to the famed Universal Biplane, which circles around the globe and helps form the Universal Pictures wording encircling this rough-around-the-edges Earth. However, it's more as if the biplane is creating contrails than the wording. It's hard to tell, to be honest. However, because this is a rather old variant, there are obvious quirks to point out. For one thing, the Earth is spinning counterclockwise, which indicates the Earth is engaging in some retrograde action, since, well, the Earth technically spins clockwise in space. Second, the wording that surrounds the Earth looks rather off-putting to me. The distorted U at the beginning and the S at the end makes the wording look freakish, if not borderline cheesy. It's almost as if the wording had to do a contortion act to give the illusion of them wrapping around the Earth, so to speak. I guess by 1920s standards it was cutting edge. In addition, the Earth model itself is a study in hilarious inaccuracies. For one thing, Madagascar is insanely huge. Indonesia also seems to be placed directly over Australia, and Japan and the Philippines are kind of non-existent. However, as mentioned before, this was probably a valiant effort, especially considering the limitations of 1920s technology. Here are two examples of this early Earth and biplane logo. One is in black and white, and one in sepia tone. As the years went by, the Universal began to become more technologically savvy. They decided to reimagine the Earth and biplane model, and thus went back to the drawing board to clean up the rough-around-the-edges part of the logo. A new and improved version of this theme was introduced in our next variant. Just like the previous logo, we have the Earth, we have a biplane, and we have the cloud background. However, what separates this variant from the previous variant is a major improvement in quality. Here we have a more accurate Earth, complete with topographic details to make it more realistic. In addition, the Earth is tilted at an angle, which is doubly realistic because in space, the Earth is tilted on its axis. The spin of the Earth has also been corrected, as the Earth is now spinning clockwise. Again, the biplane makes an appearance, starting from the left portion of the Earth and flying with the spin of the Earth, which would imply the biplane is unrealistically speedy. Roller coasters would be envious of that rapid biplane. Instead of forming contrails, the biplane flies over the center of the Earth, while the text "A Universal Picture" linear wipes from the left to the right, with the wipe being a diagonal. The font of the wording definitely smacks of the 1920s and jazz age, though it is definitely more touched up and refined. In the audio department, the only sound that is heard in the opening sequence is the sound of the biplane itself, which is way better than the stark silence that was given to us in the previous variant. At least it provides some decent background while the logo presents itself to the audience. Here is a generalized version of this logo in all of its glory. As an added bonus, here is an ending sequence that contains the same logo and animation, but with the movie's ending theme music. This logo certainly is a vast improvement from the previous variant, although I have to question the background of the logo because if we are seeing the Earth suspended in space, why are there clouds? But if you want something that screams Art Deco, fanciness, and perhaps more realism, prepare your eyes for the next variant. Now this, my friends, is a thing of pure beauty. When I first discovered this logo ages ago, I found it to be mesmerizing and hypnotic. The effects were brilliant, and the font used for the wording was classy as all hell. But I think what was most distinctive and enduring about the logo, at least to me anyway, was the fanfare. Yes, in this variant we are treated to the first universal fanfare, composed by film composer Jimmy McHugh. Although, to be quite honest, there does seem to be some subtle resemblances between this fanfare and the 20th Century Fox fanfare. Ugh, I don't want to ruin the majesty of this music, seriously. Anyways, the visuals are definitely outstanding for the time. The Earth has been replaced with a glass globe, almost reminiscent of an early disco ball that Jay Gatsby would use as decoration for his roaring parties. While it's more of a smoothed-out version of a disco ball, it's still wondrously reflective either way. There are also stars surrounding the logo, twirling and shining alongside the reflective globe, which is also tilted at an axis. The text, which is also tilted, slowly revolves around the globe in an organic and fluid fashion, which means that the fact that some genius built this model and filmed it is downright impressive. Apparently it was built by Prince Alexander Golitsyn, a Russian production designer. The text dominates the logo and is the centerpiece of this particular variant. Everything about this variant is kinetic, and you'll probably notice something new every time you view this logo. It is perhaps one of my favorite and most treasured variants of the Universal logo that I am aware of. Here it is in all its glory, with the majestic theme song that inspires me every time. Every time! Pure brilliance. Here is a colorized version, although the original fanfare in this case has been substituted for the Woody Woodpecker theme song, since Universal was behind this genius cartoon. Note how the colorized version is in blue. This logo variant lasted for more than a decade, until something major happened in the corporate structure of Universal around 1946. More about that and the variant will be discussed next in... Before we go into this variant, time for a quick history lesson about the company so that you can get some perspective on why Universal changed hands around this period of time. This isn't the Wall Street Journal, doofus! Oh, shut up and listen! Carl Laemmle, despite being the head of Universal, was guilty of committing nepotism to the highest degree, as he hired many cousins of his to work at his studio. To put the icing on the nepotist cake, his son, Carl Laemmle Jr., assumed control of the company as a 21st birthday present. Laemmle Jr. became head of the company in 1928, and persuaded the elder Laemmle to begin taking risks. Universal in general was a conservative company. They were the underdogs who made money more so off their movies than investing in entities such as theater chains to gain more revenue. Laemmle Jr. modernized the studio by building more theaters, updating their audio technology, and drenching movies in Technicolor. He was also known for his forays into horror films, as classical gems such as Frankenstein, Dracula, and The Invisible Man were produced under him, although The Phantom of the Opera still is the most classic horror movie in my humble opinion. However, Universal was always modest when it came to budgets. As mentioned prior, they were more so a mini-major film studio than one which had huge budgets and massive clout, such as 20th Century Fox or Paramount. After their immediate modernization, though, Laemmle Jr. wanted to be radically ambitious. The company bit off more than they could chew, unfortunately, when trying to secure money for a high-production remake of their earlier 1929 film Showboat. They had to obtain a loan, but because Universal was already strapped for cash, Laemmle Jr.'s only collateral that he had was his entire family's controlling interest in the company. Despite the 1936 adaptation of Showboat's critical and financial success, the Laemmles still could not pay their creditors back, and were dishonorably removed from the company that the senior Laemmle originally founded. In a sad and ironic twist of fate, Universal was Laemmle-less by 1936, and the creditors took over Universal. Laemmle Sr. passed away in 1939 of cardiovascular complications. Exactly 40 years later, in 1979, Laemmle Jr. passed away from a stroke. So what did any of this previous backstory have to do with our current variant of the logo? Well, Universal was still scraping along with small budgets and were still underdogs. They constantly had to borrow talent from other studios just to get by with their own productions. It was not until 1945 that another film magnate would intervene and attempt to hurdle Universal into the major film leagues. Enter British entrepreneur J. Arthur Rank, the man behind the famed Rank organization. Rank, being interested in investing overseas, decided to merge his companies with Universal's in 1945, only to have it fail within a year. Nevertheless, Rank had another alternative up his sleeve. Working with William Getz, he formed another new company, which was known as Universal International. Getz, who was the son-in-law of film mogul Louis B. Mayer, founded International Pictures Inc. years prior. His goal was to bring glamour and prestige to Universal, ending the production of B-movies and creating more highbrow and high-quality pictures. Universal International became an official joint company in 1946, although it is important to remember that Universal was still considered independent, as it was merely a merger with another company, not a company buying a controlling interest in Universal itself. Because of this merger, a new logo was created, one that reflected the sophistication that Getz wanted to bring to Universal, but also the dawning of a new era of Universal's existence. The logo for Universal International placed the revolving Earth against an actual starry background, which now made the logo cosmologically accurate, at least in the sense that the Earth is certainly rotating in space. Stars dot the background with little splotches of the Milky Way in between the stars. Like with the previous variants, the Earth is revolving, and again, topographically, the Earth looks realistic and plausible. The wording is what makes this logo variant distinctive. Plastered on the Earth are the words Universal International, with the letters U and I being markedly larger in size in comparison to the rest of the letters. The rotating Earth and the wording would simply fade in and then fade out, so in comparison to the other logo variants we have seen, this variant is a bit simpler. In later variants, a production credit was given to Edward Mull, who was a major player at Universal during the merger and later in Universal's history. This additional plastering occurred around the early 1960s, although ownership shifted by that point. More on that in a bit. Here are some versions of this Universal International logo. There are both black and white and color versions of the logo, though it does not have its own fanfare. It is worth noting that every time I have seen a Universal International logo, foreboding music plays in the background. Just listen and view these versions for yourself. Although Universal International produced hits such as Great Expectations and Hamlet, they still experienced many failures at the box office. Due to such horrible luck, Rank lost interest and sold his controlling interest in the company to investor Milton Laemmle. Laemmle allowed his company to fully control Universal by 1952. What was Laemmle's company? You're going to be surprised. Decca Records. Yes, the same Decca Records that signed on the Rolling Stones and snubbed the Beatles. This was one of the first instances in which an outside company bought a film studio, though we have seen examples in previous episodes. However, this was a rather exotic situation. A record company now owned Universal International. That's something I never expected to say on a video on my channel. This variant would remain until 1962, when Universal was acquired by another company merely a decade after Decca was given full control by J. Arthur Rank. More to come when we discuss our next, and perhaps one of the most readily recognizable Universal logo variants. This is perhaps the variant that many viewers of this show are familiar with, most likely because of A, the longevity of the logo, or B, its featuring in front of blockbuster hits such as E.T., or Back to the Future, or even Airport. However, this logo represents a major turning point in Universal's history. It is sometimes known as the first logo variant of Universal's second era, mainly because of what was happening within Universal around the time this logo variant debuted on big screens everywhere. Time for some more complicated history behind Universal's corporate lineage. Again. So this is going to be an extended discussion. Again. So grab your popcorn. Again. At least you'll understand how MCA Inc. nudged its way into the Universal logo. Here's a warning sign to get you prepared. As mentioned already, Universal was acquired by Decca Records in 1952. However, another music company was slowly but surely exerting its influence on Universal and its product. That company was known simply as the Music Corporation of America, or MCA Inc. MCA was originally a talent agency and was considered one of the largest in the United States by the late 1930s. One of the chief figures of the company was studio executive Lew Wasserman, and he had the brilliant idea of expanding MCA into television and other entertainment media. MCA was responsible for the relaunch of Revue Studios in 1950, despite the policy that talent agencies were expressly prohibited from producing television shows. But that was not enough for Wasserman and MCA. Here is where Universal comes in. In 1958, MCA bought the Universal Studios from the film company, as Universal again faced a paucity of money for budgets. They were still able to rent the studio, however, and Universal was given what they needed: stars and talent. MCA's roster included luminaries such as James Stewart and Alfred Hitchcock, to name a few people. Later, Hitchcock would purchase thousands of shares of the company when it went public, making him one of the largest investors in MCA. In 1962, Decca Records agreed to a merger with MCA Inc., making MCA Inc. the new parent company of Universal after the merger. MCA had to dissolve its talent agency in order for that to happen. From that point forward, Universal was considered an A-film movie studio and was no longer the underdog that it was for so many decades. MCA provided the financial power necessary for Universal to finally take command of the film industry. Of course, with any corporate changing of hands, the logo was altered to account for this recent merger. The logo was designed by Universal Title and Optical. The very same company was also responsible for Universal's television logos. But that's a story for another day. The logo features our Earth, of course, with its resolute spinning, though the logo appears to be more, shall we say, gaseous than Universal's previous variants. This is because the logo includes two fuzzy bluish ellipses surrounding the Earth, which could represent the Van Allen radiation belts, though to me it seems like a strange aesthetic choice rather than an ambitious attempt to be scientifically accurate. The wording is what is most striking about this logo variant. The word Universal is placed in the center in a bold and assuming font. It also appears to have a bronze aesthetic to it. Sometimes it was sandwiched in between the words A and Picture, which existed above and below the word Universal respectively. They appear as plain white text. On other occasions, the word Universal appears with the byline, an MCA company, since, well, MCA owned them at the time. In earlier forms of the logo, Edward Mull is again credited as in charge of production, though that was removed in later incarnations of the logo. There also seems to be two major ways in which the logo appears on screen. One version starts with us flying through space. The Earth then fades in, and we slowly zoom in on the Earth. Suddenly, the Universal text fades in and zooms in from the center, with the Van Allen radiation belts fading in simultaneously. As all this is happening, the Earth still continues to spin, and the radiation belts appear to be flowing with whatever blue substance it is composed of. Here are the variants, including the Edward Mole credit and zoom-in versions. When the logo was presented in widescreen, the universal text, instead of zooming in from the center, simply fades in a slow but interesting fashion as it slowly emerges and becomes less fuzzy over the Earth. The byline still fades in as before. And sometimes there were also occasions where there was no byline at all. This logo variant lasted for close to 3 decades, and it certainly represents the proud, improved image of Universal. This logo represents the transition from skinflint, conservative B-movie center to prestigious Hollywood superpower, all thanks to MCA. But as time went on, things became more complicated for the supercharged Universal, as Lew Wasserman had other plans. This will be elaborated when we discuss our next variant, certainly an inevitability considering we're approaching 1990. Yep, you know the drill. Because Universal Studios was officially founded in 1915, Universal celebrated the 75th anniversary of its studios in 1990. For that purpose, Universal created one of its most enduring logos throughout its history. Although it is immediately dated, the logo itself represented an apex, both in terms of its animation sequences and its originality. It also set the stage for future variants of the logo, as other variants were merely edits and reformats of this variant's general premise. In the original 75th anniversary variant, we are given an interesting treat. We see a quick review of Universal's older logos, just so you were reminded that Universal had a long and colorful history. In addition, this is certainly a nice review of the logos we originally covered in this episode. So good on you, logo, you're being cognizant of your own history. Here's a cookie. After the older variants appear, the new Earth makes its grand debut, starting with the sun shining over the horizon of the Earth, a la Buena Vista television style, then we zoom out. As that is happening, the word Universal, emulating the older variants we have discussed, orbits around the Earth as the Earth patiently revolves. The word Universal then slows down, stops in the center, and remains there as the number 75 is written on the screen. Afterward, the words Anniversary and an MCA company appear above and below the Earth as it continues to rotate on its axis. According to the CLG Wiki, the logo was produced by the Chandler Group, which I am going to assume is a graphic arts company because I could not find much on the company, and Studio Productions, which is now known as Flip Your Lid Animation. These guys were behind older animations of the 20th Century Fox logo and the Paramount Pictures logo. Funny how things can come full circle in this series. Ironically enough, though, a majority of the logo is not CGI, which makes this logo even more astounding. The Chandler Group was responsible for the animation of the lettering as it was filmed with motion control cameras. The background of the logo was a massive painting by folk artist and painter Erich von Schmidt. Fun fact, Schmidt influenced Bob Dylan. Yes, we're making all the 60s music references in this episode. Finally, Universal's Anniversary variant is accompanied with its own fanfare, composed by the late, great, prolific film composer James Horner, may he rest in peace. It is perhaps one of the most majestic Universal themes to be set to music paper. Here is the 75th Anniversary variant in action. There is also a generalized variant of the logo which forgoes the 75th anniversary notice, but the general idea is the same, only there isn't a great montage of old logos Universal used back in the day. The MCA byline still appears in the bottom, however. This logo variant, with the exception of the limited edition 75th anniversary variant, lasted for around 7 years. Despite the constancy of the logo, many business maneuvers were occurring from behind the scenes. Before going into the next variant, we need to quickly review the newest host of internal changes Universal experienced between 1990 and 2000, just so context can be established for Universal and future variants. MCA owned Universal in earnest until 1990, when Lew Wasserman decided to expand upon Universal's television and cable presence. Where else to go but the technology metropolis that was Japan? Wasserman organized a deal with Japanese electronics company Matsushita Electric. The company would swallow up MCA and become the new parent company of Universal. Unfortunately, due to culture clashes, Matsushita Electric wanted out of Universal. Matsushita decided to sell 80% of its ownership to... get this one, guys. Canadian alcohol distillery Seagram's. Yes, the same Seagram's whose name adorns their brands of ginger ale and tonic water, although they are now owned by Coca-Cola. Matsushita Electric would rebrand itself with a more widely known name, Panasonic. What a twist! The Seagram's purchase occurred around 1995, and officially Seagram's was the owner of Universal. The purchase was rendered by Seagram's owner Edgar Bronfman Jr., who purchased Universal for around $5.7 billion. So, at this point, Seagram's had a controlling interest in Universal. This sets the stage for our next and equally as unique variant. Around this time, MCA was rebranded as Universal Studios Inc. in 1996, so the logo had to be updated with the rebranding. Enter the first Universal logo of the CGI era, which lasted until Universal celebrated its centennial anniversary in 2012. The logo was designed by graphics firm Decca Partnership, located in London. The general structure of the logo remains similar, but the way it appears on screen is remarkably different from its predecessor variant. In this variant, we see a bunch of shining lights emanating from the major cities of the world. I suppose every single city in the world has skyscrapers the size of Mount Everest. As the lights continue flickering on, we zoom out from the Earth to get a better glimpse of the entire Earth as it still charges in its revolution around its axis. In a similar fashion to the previous variant, the lettering spelling out Universal appears from the right side of the globe. It then slows down and stops at the center, with the shimmering lights remaining in the background of the Earth. The lettering is different from the previous variants, as the letters are now in white with gold borders. The font appears to be similar, however. The music was composed by famed film and television scorer Jerry Goldsmith. In comparison with the previous fanfare, it is more assertive and proud, and I dig how it builds towards the end of the logo. In some instances, Universal proudly shows their domain name on the bottom portion since this logo was introduced around the time the internet age took a foothold. Note the lack of visible byline in these variants except for the domain name. Here are several examples of this bright variant. There is also another strange version of the logo where a shadow forms behind the Universal wording and the Earth moves way too far back. Perhaps out of being overzealous or it being too anxious, who's to say? Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Universal still faced more acquisitions from outside companies. The Seagram's acquisition, as mentioned before, occurred in 1995 as Seagram's wanted to expand from wine distillery to entertainment, apparently. Unfortunately, while Seagram's was able to acquire Universal, they had to give up their shares in DuPont, a rather influential French chemical company that accounted for a majority of Seagram's earnings. Because of their acquisition of MCA, Seagram's accrued an enormous amount of debt. It also did not help that Seagram's acquired Polygram in order to further their media ventures. After another 5 years, Bronfman Jr. sold Universal in 2000 to French media company Vivendi. This led to the dissolution of Seagram's in order for Bronfman Jr. to reverse the debt. Meanwhile, MCA also folded when Vivendi acquired Universal, and thus two companies died in 2000. Seagram's being the more tragic story, since it was around since the 1850s making wine and pop products. Vivendi was then the parent company of Universal. It was another funny company to grab Universal by the horns because Vivendi used to be a French water utility. It was also another company that was founded in the 1850s for entirely different reasons than what the company was doing around the 2000s. Coincidence central. Not to mention Universal seems to motivate companies to become schizophrenic. Vivendi spun off its non-entertainment assets and created Vivendi Universal SA in 2000, though Vivendi immediately reported losses in 2002. After some corporate restructuring and their CEO being charged for embezzlement, even I can't make this up, Vivendi decided to recoup its debt by selling off some of its acquisitions. One of them was Universal, which they sold 80% of in 2004 to conglomerate General Electric. However, this was not a complete takeover, as Vivendi still owned 20% of Universal. Because General Electric was the parent company of NBC, the resulting merger established NBC Universal LLC in 2004. However, the NBC story will be reserved for another logo corner. The weird General Electric-Vivendi fusion remained until around 2011, when GE acquired Vivendi's share of Universal, then sold 51% of it to the company that everyone loves to hate, Comcast. By that point, Comcast and General Electric were the co-owners of Universal. At this point, it is now appropriate to delve into our final logo variant for Universal, coming up next. Of course, like with other companies we mentioned, Universal celebrated its 100th anniversary with indulgence and high-tech animation. However, this confuses me because Universal celebrated its 75th anniversary in 1990. That's a mere 22 years from that point, and after doing simple addition, that makes the total years 97, not 100. So what's up with this discrepancy? The best answer I can dredge up is that in 1990, Universal celebrated the 75th anniversary of its studios being founded, and in 2012, Universal celebrated the anniversary of the founding of its company. It makes sense, but leads to plenty of confusion in the end. Maybe I'm being too pedantic. Like Paramount, which also splurged for spectacular visuals on their 100th anniversary, Universal decided to commission Weta Digital of New Zealand to create a striking and ultra-realistic logo with the added stipulation that the Earth should look like Google Earth or something. This is what the company came up with. Prepare yourselves. Just as we have seen in the previous variant, we are given a quick review of the previous logos Universal used, which includes more variants including the Universal International variant. Definitely a nice little throwback montage. Then, we see the surface of the Earth as we fly through space as if we were a satellite. Then the unmistakable Universal lettering appears as cities begin lighting up around the world. The lettering as usual appears from the right-hand side of the Earth, though the lettering is so massive that it almost looks like we're about to crash into the U. Whoa, close call. The lettering moves more deliberately, and the logo takes more time to get situated as the music begins coming to an end. Underneath, the words 100th Anniversary are spelled out in a similar font, and they rotate along with the universal lettering. Underneath, we see a new byline, since at the time Comcast acquired a majority stake in the company. The byline reads, "A Comcast Company," which is self-explanatory. In addition, the Earth does not seem to want to move until the lettering all move into place. But the Earth does not move all that much towards the end of the logo anyhow. Finally, the music is ostensibly based on the Jerry Goldsmith fanfare, but it was re-orchestrated by composer Brian Tyler, who added additional instruments and choral parts to make the logo appear more dramatic and larger than life. Suffice to say, it is a bit more melodramatic, but I believe it does get the job done in the end. There is also another variant of the logo, which does not include the opening montage of old Universal logos, and you would most likely see that variant in the movie theaters, since the opening montage was more of a promotional gimmick for Universal's online presence. Though I wouldn't be surprised if they featured this in movie theaters beforehand. Finally, there is a generalized version of the logo, which does not include the 100th anniversary notice. Now, you're probably wondering why it simply says a Comcast company rather than a Comcast/General Electric company. Well, aside from that byline being a bit too cumbersome to include in a logo, the most current and final business acquisition Universal underwent involved Comcast taking the remaining 49% of Universal from General Electric. This acquisition occurred in 2013, and from that moment forward, Comcast became the parent company of Universal. To this day, Comcast still owns Universal and NBC, and still people are scratching their heads about Comcast's business maneuvers. Were they in the right? Unfortunately, if you want more details on the ethics of Comcast, you may want to peruse a different video series. And that is the current variant that we are seeing in our movie theaters and home video releases. Pretty spectacular, I must say. Certainly a majestic ending for a company that fought to remain solvent and successful, and, as an unintended consequence, caused the demise of other companies that took control of it. It shows that Universal is a relevant metaphor. Anybody who fights to find success will eventually, even if it is deferred, receive some form of success. All literary and pretentious interpretations aside, let us now finish the episode with our more lighthearted and fun segments, shall we? I am hoping that they keep this logo for a little while longer because this is certainly a high-quality Earth. And I don't think you can get any higher quality than this, unless Universal figures out a way to project their logo into the fourth dimension. I dig the animation, the classic font, and the amount of detail the logo has been given by the CGI animators. Perhaps they may adjust the size of the Earth or the wording in future variants, but the background should remain, as it is an accurate representation of the limitless reaches of space. I don't think they will drop the globe, and frankly they should not. I'd say as long as they keep this logo for a long while, they will have done their duty of being not only classic, but current. Earlier forms of this logo were a bit weird, and some were decadent as hell, but I would say that the logo is iconic. It's only fair because the Earth, in and of itself, is an identifiable and familiar place. At least it better be, otherwise I'd have to question your state of mind. Or you're probably under the control of the tyrannical alien race from Mars who wishes to conquer the solar system! Iconic, moving on. Those that are new to this series should be given a fair warning in this part of the video. I've given so many warnings in this episode. There will be a lot of Universal logo variants. Like with many of the other companies we have discussed, Universal indulged in creating custom variants for certain movies to allow for consistency in the movie's aesthetic and to show that the logo was pliable and adaptable for certain film situations and themes. In any case, here are a plethora of examples of the Universal logo modified for certain films. And I mean it when I say plethora. Grab some more popcorn, because this section will probably be as long as a feature-length film. Oh, the irony. Roll the film!
The future. The polar ice caps have melted, covering the Earth with water. Those who survive
Always live my life alone. Been searching for a place called home. I know that I've been criticized. Ignore the dreams too many lies. Somewhere deep inside. Somewhere deep inside.
Well, if you're still alive after watching all the separate custom variants, thank you for watching this entire episode. Hopefully you enjoyed our tour through space and through the optical illusions we have seen from our friends over at Universal Title and the rest. Hopefully next time we will be able to remain on Earth for our next episode. I don't think I can afford another round-trip space visit, especially considering how much debt I am in now. Ugh. Coming up next, how corporate histories of logos can actually be simple, why the Torch Lady is a femme fatale, and why polygons continue to fly around the screen and haunt your nightmares. This has been Youngblood Fantasy 91, and ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you all in the brighter later. Good night, folks, and keep on logoing!